Tyre Nichols, Rodney King, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, George Floyd. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you today to address a deeply troubling issue: excessive force by police officers, those who are sworn to protect us, to uphold the law, and to serve as role models in our communities. Excessive force is defined as a measure of coercion beyond that necessary to make an arrest. But it's more than just a definition. It represents the loss of life, the devastation of families, costly lawsuits, criminal charges, and the erosion of trust between the public and law enforcement. Allow me to paint a picture. Officer Matthews, a recent graduate of the police academy, pulls over a driver for a broken taillight. The driver becomes agitated, and when Officer Matthews tries to remove him from the vehicle, things escalate. The officer resorts to force, slamming the driver's head against the ground. Though Officer Matthews eventually restrains him and places him in the cruiser, the individual loses consciousness en route to the station and tragically passes away. The story hits the news, sparking outrage and casting a dark shadow over the police department. The family sues not just Officer Matthews but the department, the police chief, and the city itself. The city now faces legal fees and potentially a hefty settlement. In the end, Officer Matthews is charged with federal crimes and the community is left with scars that may never heal. Now, some of you may be wondering about the names I mentioned earlier. These are not just names, they are people, real human beings who lost their lives in the most tragic of circumstances. George Floyd, killed by an officer who knelt on his neck for over 9 minutes. Eric Garner, choked to death during an arrest over selling cigarettes. Michael Brown, fatally shot based on an officer's perception of his size. Rodney King, beaten nearly to death in the 1990s, an event that shocked the world. Tyre Nichols, pulled over for no legitimate reason and brutally beaten by law enforcement without cause. If we examine the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which protects against unreasonable searches and seizures, excessive force clearly falls under this protection. The Eighth Amendment prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. Both amendments form the legal basis that excessive force is unconstitutional. Additionally, Federal Code 34 U.S.C. 12601 explicitly makes it illegal for law enforcement to deprive individuals of these fundamental rights. So, how do we prevent these tragedies? I believe there are several key solutions. First, funding. Yes, we need to invest more in our police departments, not for more weapons or vehicles, but for enhanced training. With better funding, we can ensure officers receive ongoing education in de-escalation and communication, preparing them to handle difficult situations without resorting to violence. Second, we must increase training frequency. The basic training provided to officers is simply not enough. Continuous education on de-escalation techniques can significantly reduce the use of force in volatile situations. Officers should be better equipped to handle stress, manage conflict, and avoid unnecessary violence. Third, we must enhance firearms training. Training should be more frequent than the current standard of 2 to 4 times a year. If officers are more confident and skilled with their firearms, perhaps they would rely on them less often and with better judgment. In summary, excessive force is a serious problem that results in devastating outcomes for everyone involved. But we can change this. We can demand more funding for police training. We can push for policies that require de-escalation education and firearms training to become regular parts of an officer's career. We can strengthen internal affairs units to investigate these incidents more thoroughly and swiftly. As a call to action, I urge you to write to your elected officials. Push for the reforms we so desperately need. And finally, let us never forget the names of those who are no longer with us because of excessive force.